Okay, we're running.
Okay.
Okay, so we're back on a new camera.
That's right.
So where were we?
Well, there were so many different ways that conversation could have gone earlier, but then I was thinking hadn't really given a very good definition of Tao.
Okay.
And it sounds, and oftentimes people refer to it as if it's this mystical force of the universe or something like that. But it's not any kind of mystical force as much as it is, in its literal sense, if we were in Beijing or Shanghai and we were to ask a local, where can I find the Tao? They would walk you to the closest street intersection and they would point you to the street sign because Tao means street. And so when the ancients were talking about the Tao, they were talking about the path, or oftentimes it's translated into English as the way.
Which, of course, has Christian.
It also has followers of the way.
Right.
The early Christians referred to themselves in that way.
Right.
But so it's really saying that there is a certain manner or method that the universe rolls itself out, and that the path of the wise person is simply to flow
with the universe,
with the way things are going to go. Right. And that going back to one of your earlier questions about what is stagnation can now be represented by someone who's repressing or depressing their emotional state or their past personal history. They're fighting the way.
Right.
And that really is the origin point of emotional discomfort. So it comes back to an understanding of a radical acceptance and a radical responsibility towards the way things are happening in our lives and ownership of them.
So, well, that gets to another question that we've discussed and I've brought up numerous times, bringing it back to, say, EP Central. So some people will, I've got a problem, I'm going to tap on it to get rid of it. And, I get rid of this traumatic memory, get rid of some painful experience. I guess that there's clearly benefit to that. Of course, maybe it's the tension, like, are you doing it to... Well, so there's a couple of things. One is, there's a technology of that, or the Western way of that. Then there's another question about, well, okay, but what if you're tapping to get rid of the problem. Meanwhile, your entire way you conduct your life is perhaps not in accordance with the way, whatever that might mean. So, do you think maybe one could use really tapping or anything as a way to extend the ability to work 80 hours a week, which really, is that what the way is about? Is that really the natural flow? I don't know. I'm just asking. There's a question.
So I'll work my way backwards in the question. It may be the natural path, or if I may use the word karma, that some people have a mission, a felt mission in life, and they are so unified with their vocation and their avocation that 80 hours a week is kind of
not a problem.
Right, who they are because they're doing their soul work.
Right.
Now, that's probably not the vast majority of people, but I would want to give an allowance for someone who has found their path in that way. Right. That there is no one cubbyhole that we could put all people in regard to, because the idea is that each one of us has a spiritual opportunity to pursue our Tao, and each individual has their own individual path.
So it would not be, we're not going to say there is one way, like there is the Kubler, the 5 steps too, which is not really totally accurate, or there are certain maybe general ideas, like it's probably not a good idea to shoot people in the head or, walk into fire. But you're saying if certain people, it might be fine to work 80 hours a week because it's what you love, it's your passion, and for you it's just, but for somebody else it would be terrible.
If it's truly their path,
right?
Yes. And then we, as then therapists, could say, well, but
How do you know?
is it a workaholism?
Right.
Well, we could say kind of a good definition of addiction being thrown in here, that we could
Since
find...
you are an addiction specialist.
I'm also a master addiction counselor, right?
Right.
So we could say that we could use that definition of addiction that says any behavior that a person uses to cover up their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, and their process is addictive in nature, or what's now being called process addictions, behavioral addictions, right? It doesn't always have to be chemical in nature per se. So that could be a litmus test between someone who's really living their soul's purpose,
right,
versus someone who is frankly running away from their own process by obsessing on the other kinds of behavioral addictions.
Right.
So a model that we could use is the presupposition that people are born into the world essentially spiritually perfect. But what happens is a series of bumps and bruises and trials and tribulations in a very imperfect world, or what Bessel van der Kolk calls the small t traumas and the big T traumas.
I thought I said that.
Well, maybe Bessel got it from you.
I don't know. Anyway.
So, what I think about is just kind of like that perfect diamond. And it's reminiscent a little bit of the Buddhist Diamond Sutra. Yeah? That there's this perfect diamond that comes into the world, but then the imperfect world happens to the perfect diamond. You know what I mean? It happens. And then ego defense mechanisms have to kick in to protect that purity, right? And one layer of ego defense mechanism and another, and all of the behaviors that we learn, that we all learn on how to protect ourselves from pain and from discomfort, whether it's physical, emotional, or what have you. And we layer it on and layer it on over the course of childhood, adolescence, early adulthood. Every time there is a pain, a deep pain, there's another ego defense mechanism that layers itself in. Just the crud of the world. So getting back to your question, when someone says, I want to remove it, the real question here is, remove what? So in my paradigm, or this kind of Taoist, Buddhist way of looking at things, we're removing things that were never originally part of our essence. We're removing those ego defense mechanisms, those behaviors, those protections that were layered on as a result of surviving our world. So the removal is fine. And then, of course, what very sophisticated people do with all of that mud and muck. They take lipstick and they draw a perfect pink cloud of lipstick all around it so that it looks really, really good.
Right.
Like workaholism, for instance, or seeming good in front of others.
Right.
Because we're afraid that if they find out about my muck, then they will judge me and not like me. So I'm going to even put on one last layer of perfectionism around it.
Right.
So here's a distinction, because I would say part of the Western paradigm would then pass a value judgment around, this person is, bad, or the addiction is bad, or the behavior is bad, and so forth. But from a Taoist or energetic point of view, at least from the Taoist Oriental medicine point of view, it's more about removing that which never belonged to our soul identity. And people come into the world as a diamond. And the more they remove that muck, the more the light
of the diamond.
Right, the light which isn't of the diamond, but it can shine through the diamond and refract onto all of our other relationships into the world.